Pete Donaldson, an absolute pleasure to have you on Travel Talks, mate. You were one of the guests which I wanted on from day one. So thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
Pleasure, man. Yeah, it's a Friday afternoon. Life is good, or about as good as it can be. Lockdown, are we in 3 or 4? I don't really know what lockdown we're in now, but
3,
it's. I think it's starting to really grind people's gears. I mean, and I would suggest, what is it? 29th we're recording this, so to break the momentum if this has gone out weeks in advance. But yeah, I hope everyone's okay who are listening.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear about all of your travel stories because, of course, everyone knows your love of Japan, but hopefully we can uncover some of your other loves in terms of countries, cities, and everything else in between. I wanted to start by talking about the fact that obviously you love travel and we can't travel this year. How have you found it not being able to travel?
Well, I mean, it's two-pronged, really. I have itchy feet at the best of times, and I just constantly want to travel. I constantly want to leave the country. Constantly just want to leave the town and city that I'm residing in. But yeah, I've found it more difficult than most because I only recently, in the last 8 years, discovered going places. I was sort of in a relationship where my ex-girlfriend would constantly be sort of talking about going traveling. She wants to go traveling again. She went traveling in her 20s and she went traveling again. And I always saw it as being like a bit of a cop out. She wasn't having a nice time at work, so I presumed it was, something to do with that. And then I went to Tokyo and I lost my goddamn mind / bank account. And just every month, I'm like, I need to get somewhere. I need to go somewhere. No one's stopping me from going anywhere, and I should go somewhere. And it's an illness. It's an absolute illness. And I was in situations where I'd be working on Thursday night until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then my next obligation was Sunday afternoon doing a radio show on Absolute Radio from 2 o'clock. Yeah. And so I would get an early flight out on Friday morning to as far as Turkey. And then spend a couple of days usually just by myself. Well, not usually, but a couple of times the Turkey one, the Istanbul trip, was just by myself because I was like, I've just never been to Turkey. I want to see I want to see the big river, and I just go there for under 2 days. Did the same Lisbon and Iceland and Finland, and I'd fly back early doors, 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning on a Sunday morning, and I'd go and do my radio show at 2 o'clock, and less stressful on the train from Manchester, to be honest. The amount of times I'd find myself on the train on the Pendolino doing a radio link pre-recorded in the toilet. And yeah, I always managed to make my obligation at 2 o'clock. I always managed to make my radio show at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday if I flew back to wherever I was after a weekend away. But the trains were just way less reliable. But yeah, it's a recent thing for me traveling. And this year has been difficult. I have got a bit of a reputation of trying to get away as often as I possibly can. But and it's easy to do, I think, when you're alone as well. It's easy to do when you've just got a mate or two mates to sort of deal with. So, all right, let's go here, let's do this. And I'm always the sort of person, I'm always the ringleader to organise that sort of thing. It's a little bit more difficult when you've got someone you actually care about who you're travelling with because they don't want to sleep in a hostel.
You mentioned solo travel there, and it's an interesting topic and something we've spoken before about on the podcast. What is it you love about solo travel?
You can have a lie in if you want. You don't feel like you're missing out because it's very much everything's on your terms. It's really lovely during the day to just do the things that you want to do. It's the evenings that are difficult, I think. Drinking alone, reading your phone in a bar, and just to feel like you're doing something rather than just going to bed at a reasonable hour. That's when it starts to get lonely. But I think so. If you're not a drinker, if you're not a big kind of nightlife kind of guy or gal, I think solo travel is eminently doable, and I would recommend anyone who thinks they've had a good holiday, try and do it solo because you have a proper giggle. Nice. And you can do what you want.
Nice. So I want to start speaking about Football Ramble because, of course, you've built one of the world's biggest football podcasts. And in terms of how that relates to travel, I wanted to ask a quick question which came to my head when prepping for this. Has the Football Ramble been listened to in every single country in the entire world?
I believe so. It's one of those kind of things that you look at when your podcast starts. You say, "Oh, we got a listener in South Korea, or we got a listener in this place and that. You know, Vatican City and stuff. Like, this is interesting." But truly, yeah, I'm fairly certain we've ticked off every place on the map. I'm fairly certain that every podcaster gets to listen at least once from each territory, because I presume there's some kind of bot that's set up to listen. So I imagine we haven't actually been listened to in North Korea, but I wouldn't put it past them. I reckon we've got something for everyone. But yeah, I reckon we probably have been listened to in most places and at scale, I think.
Nice. So I want to take it all the way back now to the start. So 2007, you joined in 2008, is that correct?
Yeah, it was going for a little while. It started as a kind of sort of university project, I want to say, possibly, and then kind of took a couple of years off, and then came back properly a year before I joined, and I had access to radio studios, and that's why I got involved, because they needed somewhere to record, and I as a radio DJ had a lot of studios to play with. So yeah, that's how I got involved, and revolutionized it.
Absolutely. More than just the producer now.
Yeah, they used to call me Producer Pete. I remember that. It's weird how it all sort of pans out, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there are so many proud moments from the show. 13 years now, of course. So if you had to pinpoint a highlight from your time doing the show, of course, it's taken you around the world as well. Is there a particular highlight which you could tell me?
As it pertains to the show itself, I think this year has been a really strong one, just because we brought new people on and new people in. That we couldn't have done a Monday to Friday show with just 4 people. It was just unworkable, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to get everyone together at the same time, and yeah, it's important, I think, to maintain a kind of thread and maintain a sort of style of presenting. But we needed people who were good, and we needed people who would, continue the Football Ramble narrative and continue the Football Ramble journey. And this year I've been really proud of how that's kind of fitted together. Like Kate, Vish, and Jules and Andy, I'm having a ball. I really am. I'm not under lockdown. I blooming hate recording shows under lockdown. I prefer being in a studio. But yeah, I'm really vibing, as they would say. But I think even as it pertains to travel, I think some of the highlights include our first trip away, which was. We had trips away, but like the first proper kind of sponsored thing was a promotion we did with, inexplicably, Paco Rabanne, the fragrance.
Nice.
People, 1 million fragrance for men it was. And we went to Johannesburg for the World Cup, and we didn't actually see any of the matches. We just rented this little kind of, I suppose you call it a little villa, and all 6 or 7 of us were just in this villa, and we just we went to like fan parks, and so we didn't actually see any football live. And I think we were only there when the semi-final and the final were getting played. And visiting the fan parks, having a crack at playing the vuvuzela and doing the dancing and stuff, and watching the people of Soweto experience something they'd never experienced in some of their young lives. And it was a really, really fun, eye-opening trip, and it was something else. It really was
lovely stuff. And of course, your live shows have taken you around the world and around the UK too as well. So I wanted to touch on your live shows. You've traveled around the UK more than most. Is traveling around the UK something you enjoy? Obviously, you've spoken about your love of going a bit further afield.
Yeah, I think the lads always take the mick, because I would constantly. We had a minibus. So the last tour, we did it properly. We got a comedy company to sort out all the logistics, because the person who used to do it, who's still with us, is our CEO. It's like herding cats. It is an unlovable job for anyone. So I think anyone who's an actual professional, and he was good. He got us our backdrop and worked on all of like the lights and the stuff, and it was just a much more professional setup. Our tech guy was the guy who drove us around in a big van. I don't like driving in vans, so I went into Hock. I spent a ridiculous amount of money in 2019 just getting on trains, and just because I don't like the waiting around for the bus to leave, and and I'd rather just walk to the train station, get on the train, and know that I'm moving when I want to move.
Okay.
I can eat me dinner, and I get a bit car sick as well. I'm not a big car. I've never driven a car in my life, and I would constantly just sort of go, I'm getting the train, and and they used to take the mick out of me really. But other people were driving, so it was absolutely fine. But our tech did a lovely job just getting us to all these places, and I find train travel very therapeutic. So that was my choice. But some of the best shows we've sort of played to we've done like in Europe, we've done Norway and Ireland and places like that. But our favourite shows, I think, were probably places like Manchester. We did some good shows. Newcastle was a big one for me personally, because my mum and dad got to see me talking about stuff they just don't have any idea about. Just unlovable sport for them. But and it was a really, really good tour 2019, and like hopefully we'll do one again, and we'll have more people. At least we'll have more people to get involved, thank Christ.
You mentioned Newcastle there. You're from Hartlepool, aren't you?
Yeah. So I always sort of last time I played football, there was this lad who was a Geordie playing, and everyone was just calling him Geordie, and whenever we would come close to each other, go, two Geordies together. And he knows I'm not a Geordie. Even though I'm a Newcastle supporter, I feel like an absolute Walter. I feel like an absolute liar anyway. And like, he knows I'm from Hartlepool. And I just feel really sort of bad that but honestly, everyone down south, if you're from north of like, I don't know, Yorkshire, you're just a Geordie. It doesn't matter what you are, you're a Geordie.
I don't know if you know Savannah Marshall, a professional female boxer. 2 weeks previous to when this episode goes out, I've had her on. She's also from Hartlepool. So we've got a nice little streak going there.
That's hilarious. Lovely old job.
I'm just going to get Jeff Selling next week, and then we're all good.
The canoe man.
So she spoke about the fact that when she was living in Hartlepool as a child, she didn't travel much. I wanted to briefly touch on your life traveling as a child. Did you experience travel much as a child? You mentioned that you kind of came to traveling a little bit later in life. Yeah,
no, I mean, my first flight was 25, I think. I was going to have to go from Jersey. And we'd fly down there every now and again. And I tell a lie, actually. My first flight was in New York, I think. My mum and dad had taken me to something, and it was an air show or something. We went to like a fairground or something, and this guy next door just had this. Might have been Lightwater Valley, but basically on the site they had this pilot guy who had like a little 2-man, 3-man plane, and he'd take you up and whiz you around and stuff, and then put you back down again. And my dad thought it was hilarious that he would take me up in this plane. So me, my dad, and this bloke just went up in this little 3-man plane round. I wouldn't do that now. God.
In at the deep end.
It was so dangerous. I mean, I know it's not that dangerous in the grand scheme of things, but the video, the GoPros where the flights go wrong. I watched so many of them where they're starting to leak oil, or the back of the doors come off and hit the stabilizer at the back, and I cannot imagine how unsafe that was. So my first flight was actually that, but no, we didn't really go anywhere. Butlins, we went to Scarborough and Filey, and that was our holidays really. We weren't well off, and so it was just caravan parks and stuff like that. Fun, but I always sort of, pretty much everyone I know down here, they all sort of talk about their little trips to France and stuff, even if it wasn't a car. Well, we didn't have a car as well. Fundamentally, none of my parents drove, so. We're quite. It was quite limited. I think I don't really know the Hartlepool area properly because it was just all on buses and stuff, and the buses are unspeakable. They stop at like 6 o'clock in the evening.
So I wanted to progress on and move on to talk about abroad in Japan now, because as a big fan of the podcast, I can't wait to pick your brains on it. So I wanted, before we start talking about the podcast itself, we touched on it a little bit earlier. I wanted to ask you, what sparked your love for Japan?
I don't like the films. I don't like the anime. I'm not a fan of manga. I'm not a weird pervert. So it's kind of like, it's just I am a sickening freak for the new. I'm obsessed with novelty. I'm obsessed with candy that you go to a shop and there's a new kind of candy and I'm like, a new kind of sweet. And I'm like, oh, but I have to have that. I have to taste that. Even though it tastes like everything else, just with a bit more salt or a bit more sugar, or a bit more thing in it. I'm like, well, I have to taste that because it says it's watermelon flavored and I've never had a watermelon flavor, so it's all that stuff. So I love novelty and I love stupid, witless novelty for novelty's sake. And yeah, so Japan was always one of those places where it's like, is going on over there? That's ridiculous. It's like very bizarre. So yeah, that was it for me. When I was just out of university, 22, I applied to do teaching as a foreign language. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My qualifications were all geared towards like 3D design.
Okay.
Like making low polygonal models for video games, and so I applied for a couple of jobs, and they were all kind of like in deepest darkest, like Bangor in Wales and stuff. And I didn't really sort of fancy it. I knew I needed to be in London at the very least. I needed to be in a big city after my time in Leicester, which I absolutely loved. I love Leicester. Yeah, I tried to get onto a TEFL course in Japan. But just stacked it, man. I have no regrets, but if I did, it probably would be one of my big ones that I never got out and lived there for a couple of years, because it was just it would have been a lot of fun. And my heart wasn't into. I remember I did the audition, I did the interview, and I just stacked it. I was just so unimpressive. I was so shy. People who knew me from university find out, I was a radio DJ, I do voiceovers, I talk on podcasts and stuff. They're surprised because they may have heard my podcast and I'm terrible at it, but fundamentally they were very surprised because I was very shy back in the day. Very shy when I was a university student, when I was that age. And you sort of grow into yourself a little bit, but I stacked that interview so hard, and so I never got to live out there. I love visiting, and to be honest, when I visit now, I do 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I'm like, yeah, I couldn't live here. It's
oh really?
It's very. I'd be very lonely. I think I'd be very lonely, and it's not a place for anyone who cares about social issues, because just women, minorities, it's not a nice place for them. And so I'd be sort of doing myself over, I think, if I made that leap.
Okay, so let's speak about the podcast now. How did the idea for the podcast come about? So
again, I'm a real thirst for Japanese kind of like geek culture, like video games and stuff, and just stupid stuff, and Chris's and so Japanese vlogging is quite limited in its scope. Frequently, it's just blokes and women who have moved out to teach English as a foreign language, like I was applying to do when I was in my 20s, and they just sort of they just walk around and go, look at this, and then look at this, and they put some sort of Japanese sound music over the top of it, and that's it. And I used to consume this YouTubery, and Chris's was just the best. It was produced better. It had gags in there. He seemed to be a relatively funny young man, and he had these little characters in his little Marvel universe, Natsuki and Ryotaro and Shala and people that he knew. And his films, his videos were just a cut above everyone else, and he had a big following. And at the same time, I was involved in a nascent podcast company, Stakhanov. So we were sort of not breaking away, but like starting to produce the Football Ramble and other projects as well. I was working on a wrestling one with my mate Mark, and we were looking for new projects and stuff. And so Abroad Japan's like one of those ones that's been around for a little while, but Chris was in London, and he was filming something in Natsuki, some kind of his Japanese friend from up in Armor. Is it Armory? I think he lives up there anyway. And he's like this hairdresser, but he's this kind of like larger than life. The sort of character you see quite a lot in Japan. These kind of young, these kind of blokes who know limited English, but they are incredibly into the music of the West and the people and stuff, and they're so interested and interesting, and they're these kind of like charismatic, larger than life characters. And Chris managed to hang out with this really funny guy called Natsuki, and so they were filming something in London, and I was like, I really want to meet that guy. And so I did my radio show at that point, and I just got him in and sort of went, look, do you want to have a chat about your your thing. I don't even think it went out on air, you know.
Oh, really?
This is probably an exclusive. I don't think I even put that out on air in the end, but I think Chris thinks I did. But never mind. We've been stuck together for the past 3 years, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been good. And so every time I go to Japan, I see Chris, and we usually film something together, and try and build on the success of the podcast. And the podcast has just gone from strength to strength, even though I'm a man who's resident in England, and obviously don't get to Japan as often as I'd like.
Because I came across the podcast about 6 months ago in lockdown. And I was searching for travel podcasts, and it kind of sparked this essentially. And I gave your show a listen, and initially I was like, how can people make a show purely about speaking about Japan twice a week? And ever since, I've just been glued to it. So would you be able to give a little bit of insight into how you talk about just Japan twice a week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of quite aware of what Chris has said on previous podcasts. We've had a lot. We've had hundreds of episodes now. It's been crazy, especially because we went from once a week to twice a week. And yeah, I mean, it's a mix of news stories, because there's always some crazy news stories. There's always some bloody robot doing something, or some kind of crazy person who's done something mad or opened a shop that sells, I don't bloody know, puppets, whatever. Just there's always something going on, and that's why I love Japan, and that's it kind of feeds my appetite for that kind of like mania. It's just I love it because it's just a nation of like just children who've got jobs and they've got money, and they go, I'm going to open a shop that just sells oranges, and everyone goes, cool, and they just do it, and it's like fucking brilliant. Excuse my language. And so we do like the news of the day. We try and put a little bit of kind of culture in there, as in how the West differs to the East, and a whole bunch of it, to be honest, is just people who've been to Japan, want to go to Japan, and they get in touch via email, or we call it the fax machine, because Japan's quite unique. It's one of the few places in the world that still uses fax machines in everyday life. Everyone's got a fax machine.
Really?
It's them and football managers, so they're the only ones.
I was reading Abroad in Japan's website in preparation for this, and on the website it states that incrementally you become more fluent in Japanese language with every visit. So I wanted to ask you, how fluent are you in Japanese, and how have you taught yourself the language?
Oh God, not at all. It's it's one of those ones where I think I've just been learning vocab, so I probably know about 50 words. That's it, but they're the words that matter.
Yep.
Yeah. The ones the things I find weird about the Japanese language are word order, object markers. There's for everything you've got, there are counting words. So if you want to say, like, I don't know, 1 cup. Yeah. 1 cup. We just say 1 cup over here, but they've got very specific versions of the word one for things that hold things that are short and circular, things that are square, things that, it's just all, there's like 100 counting words for one thing. There are generic versions of those counting words, but there are certain aspects of the Japanese language I know for a fact, because I'm never going to live there, that never say never, but I'm never going to live there. I'm never going to need. So I just find the basics, find words that you need to express yourselves. Difficult, hard, hot, cold, easy, and that's what I've been focusing on. The three writing alphabets, the katakana, the hiragana. One's used for Japanese words, the other's used for borrowed words, romaji words, like computer, or I don't know, cheese. And so they're used for that. And then there's the kanji, the very complicated compound symbols that the Chinese used back in the day as well. I think I'm right on all of these, but yeah, the kanji, I'm just like never going to get my head around that. I'll learn hot, cold, chicken, beef, prawn. I'll learn all of them, because I know what I need to look at if we're in a restaurant, because a lot of restaurants are just like handwritten menus and stuff, and you get the best meals from these kind of like very remote little restaurants and stuff. So I know for a fact I don't need most kanji. I know for a fact that I'll just learn, I've just been learning hiragana and katakana, and then I can at least have a crack at possibly figuring out what what they're meaning on signs and stuff. But everything else is just like, can I have a beer? Sorry. Just saying sorry all of the time. There's a million ways to say sorry and a million different kind of honorifics on top of it to, be more honorable and stuff. So again, I've learned very few words. Chris always takes the mick that I know more than I actually let on. But no, it's one of those ones where whenever I travel, I try and learn, 10 sentences that will help me out, wherever I am, from Sweden to Iceland to Finland and other places that aren't at the north of the globe. But I try and learn as many as I can, and it's I think it's nice. The closer you get to England, though, the better people are at speaking English, obviously. And Japan's one of those unique places where a lot of people don't speak English, and that is, especially the older generation, and you do kind of need a few Japanese words, although it is getting better. The street signs, the tube maps, everything is it's a lot easier now. Even 5 years ago when I started, 6 years ago when I started going for the first time, street signs and stuff and tube maps just weren't in any kind of shape for English speakers or English readers. And now the levels just they understand that tourism is on the rise, and so they've changed up a little bit. So it is a lot easier to get around, and certainly a lot cheaper as well.
Lovely stuff. So now is the point of the podcast where I usually ask people what their favorite country is, but I feel like we've already discussed it.
Yeah. Sorry to beat on about Japan, but it is just a bit. I get home and I'm just like, I've done 2-3 weeks, and I'm like, don't need to do that again. I'll go somewhere else the rest of this year. And then about 3 weeks later, I'm like, I want to go back because I don't know what it is. I just feel. I feel zen. I feel calm, even in the center of Shibuya, even in the center of the busiest and most full city in the world, Tokyo. I just feel flipping great.
Lovely stuff. Let's keep the conversation going, because I'd love to hear more about like individual memories from trips to Japan. Is there a particular fond memory from a visit to Japan which immediately springs to mind?
Waking up after a heavy weekend in Fukuoka, which is a sort of fishing sort of port. It was where the Dutch first arrived. They were the first visitors to Japan, and you weren't allowed to bring stuff in. You weren't allowed to bring contraband, but the Dutch loved their cheese, and they kept on just hiding cheese about their person, and they would. The Japanese didn't know how foreigners dressed, so the Dutch would come in with these trousers that were like all skate trousers, massive trousers, and they'd be hiding cheese in them. And that's what always makes me laugh about Fukuoka, because all these Dutch people waddling around in massive trousers full of cheese, full of contraband fromage. But Fukuoka, just kind of that kind of horrible, they call it jisaboke, which is time stupidity over there, jet lag, and waking up at like 5 a.m. on a really sunny day in Fukuoka with my mate Alex, Alexei, and he does a bit of telly and stuff. He does our podcast Clash of the Titles, and just having a stroll around, and I just remember the sun coming up, and in the morning, all the old people who would just walk around the Peace Park, walk around the park near our hotel and stuff, and I'd be walking around, and I've been up for like hours and hours and hours, and obviously people would, I think, just going to bed in London. So I was having a conversation with my girlfriend, and it was just really peaceful, and I think that's some of the smaller cities can still be very, very peaceful, and everyone's really friendly. But yeah, I mean, another kind of 5 a.m. start with Chris last January, so maybe start of February, we went out with Chris to film a piece with some fishermen. So when the big earthquake and tsunami hit just near Sendai, obviously near Fukushima and all those places, like, the water rolls in and just decimates the entire area in this. I can't remember the town we were in, but absolutely decimated. It killed an entire generation of people. And after the water's rolled out, as the towns and villages are getting back on their feet, obviously there's a government government kind of stimulus packages for these areas to try to get them back on their feet again. And so they build these kind of like new little mini ports for fishermen, and these fishermen who sort of lived their lives, I don't know, picking up salmon and tuna and stuff. They started to diversify and just basically farm seaweed. So they have these big ropes in the water out to sea, and they go out and the seaweed just grows on these ropes. And so at 5 a.m. we're in this. We leave our little kind of business hotel in the arse end of nowhere, and we go out with these fishermen and these really sort of briny kind of old guys, and then they're kind of they're greenhorns, they're guys, they're teaching their trade and stuff, and they're these incredibly resourceful men, and they've become sort of quite iconic for their village. They're the people who go out and bring in these great hauls of grass effectively from the sea, and obviously Japan and elsewhere have a lot of love for seaweed, and so they've made a bit of a tidy coin with it, but just going through these areas that have been decimated by the tsunami, and no one lives there, but there's these outposts where all of these fishermen and you're sort of coming in from the sea after chatting with these guys and filming with them and stuff, and they're all blooming lovely, absolute menschers, and you look in you look at the tree line at the coast, and the floats that used to be in the sea bobbing about, the little buoys and stuff, some of them you can see in the trees. So the water had come up so high. Wow. The buoys were kind of like meters and meters and meters up high at the top of the trees, and they kind of keep the buoys there just to sort of go, this is how bad it was, and this is how far we've come. And we visited it was like a wedding venue, this kind of 5-story wedding venue. Chris did another video about it later. It's well worth checking out. And when the water rolled in, the tsunami rolled in, there was this big birthday party happening with these old kind of middle-aged and old elderly people celebrating someone's birthday, and it was this old sort of dilapidated wedding venue where you'd go and get married, like a kind of town hall but much smaller, and when the water started rolling in and the alarms were going off for the tsunami and the earthquake and stuff, the manager of the venue just took everyone up the roof and basically just basically manhandled everyone up, because some of them wanted to leave and go to their homes and stuff, and people wanted to leave, and the people who did leave actually they lost their lives. They broke ranks and they ran for their homes, and they all died. But this manager just had the foresight. He was a fisherman. He knew how dangerous the sea could be, and he knew what a swell would do to the area. Took them on the roof, and there's this incredibly affecting image of 120 people or something on the roof of this building, and the water was up 5 floors, and he managed to save 120 people. Every single person who was in that building kept their lives, whereas everything else, from schools to hospitals, everyone died. It was awful. And a dog, and one dog. He managed to save one dog, which is lovely. And and so although they've terraformed the entire area around it, everything's just protected from the sea now. They've kept this as kind of like a beacon, like a kind of museum to what happened before. And so we got to walk around and to see this dilapidated kind of building that just had the innards kicked out of it, and this old videotapes and old pencils and stuff that had become rotted by the water, and it's just this incredible. It's like the clocks had stopped. Time stood still at that moment, and it was like a shipwreck, but it was on land. It was incredible, and I'm so glad that Chris allowed me to tag along for that trip, because it was really, really good, but awful at the same time.
Sounds eye-opening, but very powerful at the same time.
Yeah.
I've loved hearing about Japan, but I kind of want to learn more about different countries. And in terms of the favourite country question before we move on, is there a country which even comes close?
I'll level with you. It's going to be quite close to Japan. It's Taiwan.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah, big fan of that place. If I hadn't been to Japan, I'd be like, wow, best place on earth. And it is. It's like, it's got the street food culture of places like Korea and I presume, I've never been to like Thailand or Bangkok or any of those places, but I imagine that it's got the similar sort of culture. But yeah, it's a little bit of China, it's a lot of Japan, but it's everything. Like the best things about China is that it's I've only been to Beijing and Shanghai, but the best parts of China are just that kind of like ad hoc kind of just people just getting by, just kind of there's the filth, there's the excitement, there's the slight danger as well in some towns, and it's just really exciting. And Taiwan's got all that, and it's kind of almost run in a more Japanese style, I suppose. And I could guess that historically that's kind of how that one panned out. But food is incredible. The people are incredible. I love drinking culture. The drinking is very good as well. And some of the most beautiful parts of the world. Taiwan, love
Fantastic.
Taiwan. Love it.
Lovely stuff. Love hearing new places as well on the podcast. So to move it on now away from countries and more into cities, is there a favourite city in the entire world? Yeah,
I mean, apart from your Tokyos and your that, I think I mean Berlin's got to be up there, isn't it? Just I mean, I'm sure you'll hear that time and time again. Just an exciting, vibey place. Oh, really? Cool. Yeah. Well, I have a real sort of habit of like landing. I've been to Berlin countless times, but I remember going with the Ramble to Berlin. We actually went to see, I think we went to see Hertha Berlin play, and it was rubbish. It was really bad, but and it was a nightmare to get back, and we didn't get back into town for quite a while, because if you're only there for the weekend, you don't want to get stuck somewhere that you're not particularly, that you don't want to be stuck on the end of a near the Olympia Stadion where it's really hard to get back into town and stuff. Yeah, we went, and weirdly, it was like the 25th anniversary of the Berlin Wall falling. I went to Cluj a couple of years ago in Romania, and it was the 100th year. I was 2018, wasn't it? Because at the end of the war, it was the 100th anniversary of the unification of Romania. So it was just like every time I got these places, there's a big party going on for no reason. Well, for very good reasons. But yeah, it was 25 years since the Berlin Wall came down, and and that was again incredibly affecting. The plazas and stuff, people just having the right old party. But yeah, I mean, Berlin's just got a little bit of everything. It's one of the things where like you walk through Shoreditch nowadays, and I spent a lot of time in Shoreditch about when I was, how long have I been in sort of England? How long have I been in London? I was probably like 20 years, actually for 18 years. And I spent a lot of time in Shoreditch when it was kind of, vibey and coming up. And yeah, it was wank. It was just people just with stupid haircuts being idiots, and Nathan Barley like people just, making a fool out of themselves. You go to Berlin and the same thing's happening because it's all in German. You're like, it's so cool. It's so cool. But everyone's like unbelievably cool, and everyone's doing arty stuff, and the clubs are amazing, the bars are amazing, and everyone just has a kind of very, I don't know, maybe it's just their history. Berlin's history is like, two nations, and it's just they understand the importance of temperance and people just getting on with each other. And I find Berlin incredibly exciting. It's just one of the best cities in the world. Yeah, big fan of Berlin.
Nice one. So you spoke about food a couple of times already, so I'm excited to talk to you further about food. Would you consider yourself a foodie?
I like food, and No, I don't. Because the thing is, I've made this bed for myself. I've made this rod for my back, because when like TV is just it's all food, and it's just people. It's just the decadence of the West. It's just people going nom nom nom. Oh, lovely bit of pastry, lovely bit of bread, lovely bit of it. Look at this food I've made, nom nom nom. And it's just, I just find it quite decadent, needlessly decadent. And everyone takes a mick out of me on the Ramble and stuff, because I'm just like this bloke who can't have nice things because he's refusing to have nice things. That's made a rod for my back. So when I'm in a country, I'm like, oh, this is really nice food, but I can't possibly tell anyone about it. But I'm really enjoying it because I've been such a dick about it earlier on. But yeah, I mean, look, Taiwan was great for it. Korean street food, obviously, very, very good indeed. Had some amazing Man, some of the fried chicken. We were down in Jeju, which is an island off the coast of it's one of the busiest airy plane lanes they call it, air corridors I suppose in the world, from Seoul down to Jeju, and I just had the best fried chicken of my life. I know it's not high art, it's not high food, but the Koreans just know how to do fried chicken, and yeah, Japan is beautiful for that sort of thing. Okonomiyaki, takoyaki, those little kind of pancakes. It's decent steak as well. A5 Wagyu is unbelievably expensive, but I don't think you should, if you're a meat eater, you shouldn't depart this earth without trying it at least once, because it's just the best. You can't eat much of it, so you can't really overindulge because it's just oil. But it's unspeakably good steak, and so Wagyu steak. I even like the fast food kind of off-license food of Japan. Japan's so kind of obsessed with quality and delivering a decent product that the 7-Eleven or Family Mart, or they call it Family Chicky and stuff, like the fried chicken in Family Mart, and the prepackaged meals that you can get heated up at the door, like at the counter. Like normally in England or in America, even, you'd be like, oh, this is just a dirty old hot dog with fluff on it, that the Quickie Mart's selling. But the food is just another level. It's amazing. And the fast food and the ice creams, I'm obsessed with a brand called Coolish, which is like these little pouches of ice cream. And they're just chemicals. But every couple of months they'll release a new flavor: cola, grape, all these kind of like there's some really nice drinks as well. So yeah, I like and obviously the vending machine culture of Japan is big as well. So like every corner you can go 10 seconds before you're being offered a drink, even if you're in the deepest, darkest behind end of nowhere, you will be served a vending machine that you can buy some grape juice or something. Yeah, I love Japanese food. Salo, I had Salo in, where were we? Not Estonia. It would have been Kiev. We had we went out for a couple of, for the Euros. We actually got to see some matches, thank the Lord. But I love the food. I love the kind of goulashy stuff out there. And yeah, I'll try anything. I'll try anything, me. I've never understood the sort of people who sort of worry about not being able to eat. You'll always be able to get a hamburger somewhere. You'll always be able to get some. So you may as well just try everything else. But on a hangover, pretty obscure sushi. If you ever got like a sushi place I remember being in Osaka and me and my mates went, right, let's get some sushi in. And we had this very sort of small idea of what sushi is, but it's just this beautiful sashimi on a tiny bit of rice, and with wasabi and a bit of soy. That was the idea of what sushi is. But yeah, it's proper sushi is just, as my dad used to say when we were kids, and he used to eat like octopus and stuff. It's like lips and arseholes, son. Lips and arseholes. So it's just bits and bobs, and it's just like, oh, on a hangover, you're like, oh dearie me. You've got to be careful when you're shoving cod roe in your mouth at like 10 o'clock in the morning when you've had a skinful.
Nice. And of course, you mentioned there you'd basically eat anything. And Japan, of course, is well known for the fact that they're quite inventive with some of their foods. Is there a particularly weird food which you can name that you've eaten?
I mean, I've never done like the blowfish kind of stuff. I tried a couple of times to get in, but again, my travel Japanese, my holiday Japanese didn't see me very well because the guy just threw me out. But I've had bits and bobs. Horse sashimi was quite nice. I think it's called Sakura Gyu or something. I can't. Sakura Tan. I can't remember. But Sakura, the blossoms, the pink blossoms, because it's quite pink. And that was surprisingly delicious, to be honest. Couldn't really tell the difference between that and cow. I like. I'm trying to think weird sort of stuff. I've had like chicken. I mean, you get like chicken's feet and stuff in China and stuff, and that's pretty normal. They use every part of the animal and as they should. I've had. When we're in Soweto in South Africa, obviously quite an impoverished part of the world, but obviously it's right next to a big mountain, and so it's obviously a very popular tourist. But we had my dad used to eat a lot of tripe when we were kids, and I never really fancied it. But I was in Soweto and I tried this beautifully like peppery tripe, and that was blooming lovely. So I was a big fan of that. I mean, I think I tried brains a couple of times in France, but yeah, I mean,
Nice.
it's just, I do think sometimes people are just showing off, aren't they? I still, every time I get offered, every time I'm in a French restaurant and they've got snails on, I always sort of think, I'm gonna try snails again. I'm gonna try and get a taste for it, because you don't eat, like, if you eat it for the first time and you don't like it, I think that's on you. And if you try it 2 or 3 times, just try and get a taste for it. But snails, they just taste like, people think they taste like butter. I think it tastes like grass. It just tastes like eating grass. Natto is a bad one as well. If you go to a Japanese supermarket or a Korean supermarket,
Okay.
get yourself some natto. It's this kind of like kind of fortified kind of going off soybean sort of thing. This what do you call it when, like, kimchi, they have like it starts to go off, fermented soybean sort of breakfast, and it's very good for you, but my god, it tastes like hell, but I've managed to get a taste for it. It's very good for you, but yeah, it's one of those things that if you're in a place that sells natto, definitely get your mate to eat it, because he'll be disgusted, he or she.
Awesome. Nice. I'll try that. I'm potentially going to go to South Korea this year.
Oh, lovely.
If COVID allows.
Beautiful.
Let's move on to the question of the show, which is perhaps the deepest and provokes the most thought-provoking response. And that is the holiday that means the most to you.
I think, to be honest, I think the first one I went on with my current girlfriend, I suppose.
Nice.
Current girlfriend sounds terrible, but the girlfriend, my girlfriend. Because I'm banging to traveling and stuff, and I always put myself into, like, especially when you go on holiday with your mates, you sort of just constantly just saying, I'm gonna have 2 days here, 2 days here, 2 days here, and you're just constantly on the move, and you are just constantly on the move. And me and Sarah went to Sorrento, just near Pompeii, and I'd had a weekend in sort of in Naples before a couple of times, and yeah, just drank myself daft. But but this one was like a bit more. We just stayed in Sorrento, and we had a hotel, and we just sat and enjoyed. I mean, this was this year. This was like between the 2 lockdowns, last year. And yeah, we just got away for a week or so, and it was. She doesn't force me to do stuff. She doesn't force us to be anywhere, and it is so relaxing, and I appreciate it so much. And it's just, holidays should be stopping a little bit, but for me, they've always been, go to land in Japan, land in Tokyo, then we'll fly to bloody Fukuoka, and then we'll make our way back on the train through Osaka, and we'll hit Osaka on a Tuesday, and then we'll fly into Denver, and then we'll drive down to New Orleans, and then we'll have a weekend in New Orleans, and then we'll go back up to Memphis and stuff. And it's it's kind of like all these kind of and I sound incredibly conceited, and I sound incredibly lucky that I've got to go to all these places, but it has ruined me financially. Let's make that very, very clear. I've spent I would have been all right. I look at my bank account and I'm like, what have you been doing for 10 years? You've had a few good years. But yeah, I really appreciate the trips we go to with her, because she appreciates a little bit of like walking around and stuff and seeing stuff, but she fundamentally treats holidays as they should be treated, as a bit of relaxation and a chance to read a book and just switch off, and it's just blooming great.
Nice. Slows the pace down.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's be a bit more negative now, because we've kind of been overly positive so far. I feel like we should speak about the negative side of travel. Is there a place in the world which you would never go back to?
Reykjavik is a bit overrated. I think it's one of those places that exploded about 10 years ago, and that was when I started going on trips, and I went a couple of times, and I had a lovely time, but it's very small. The town centre is very small, and I know it's a bit bloody rich because I am a tourist, but it is just very touristy, and it's kind of like, I'd had it, and the second time I went, I was just like, I mean, it's just full of tourists, and obviously the big crash all those years ago treated the Icelandics people very, very badly, and I remember the first time I went, that's the thing that they sort of barked at me more than anything else. It was just like, we didn't have tourism before the crash, and now we are absolutely ruined. And it's a great place. It is a great place. It is lovely, but the town of Reykjavik, I think, is just too small for the amount of tourists that visit there every year. And I realise I'm not helping by being a part of that. But and like the Blue Lagoon, it's just a thing next to the airport, isn't it, really? But I didn't have a nice time. We had a terrible experience and it's not Shanghai's fault, but me and a couple of friends got a bit drunk and we went for some drinks. First night we landed in Shanghai. Went to the French Quarter, had some drinks, and we'd been on a flight for like something like 13, 14 hours, and we landed and went straight out. Effectively, put our glad rags on and went straight out, and we were a bit drunk. And the one thing you should never do is try and do karaoke in Shanghai or any Chinese big city anyway, because unless it's a Lucky Voice, if it's a big company that are doing it, fine. But yeah, this was just awful because it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. We're like, we want to keep drinking, but there's no places open. And then a guy goes, "Do you want to go karaoke?" I was like, "Let's do karaoke."
Yep.
And we get in, and we sit down, and there's a karaoke machine. And it just looks like someone's front room, and it normally was. And then these ladies in negligees just come in, and we're like, flipping heck. Like these three, and there was like millions of them. And I was like, what? What is this business model? And we were like, no, sorry. We just came here to do karaoke. We're fine. And we just started to read the room a little bit, and we're like, yeah, I probably want to leave, to be honest. We thought this was a karaoke place. The man assured us it was a karaoke place. So let's get out of here. And then when we got to leave, they'd sort of go, "You owe us like 500 quid or something." Oh, just usual clip joint sort of stuff. Yeah. But it was a karaoke place. Like I'd expected if you were out for something nefarious, if you were going for something, you're going to a strip bar or something like that, I would understand. If you're going to get ripped off, you're going to get ripped off on one of those places. But it was we literally just want to keep on drinking. Let's do some karaoke, fun. And yeah, we were just and then these lads, like I've never seen so many lads come in and start pushing us around. We try and push our way out. It's just we are Chinese mafia. We're this, we're that. Our mate, who's a civil servant in the NHS, he gets his little badge out and starts flashing that about like he's RoboCop. And to this very day, he is convinced that he got us to get out scot-free without a punch in the face and a march to the ATM with a knife in our back. But it was just because me and my mate, dropped 80 quid each, and that was the way that those stories usually go, and it's the thing they put in the bloody guidebook. If I'd read the bloody guidebook, they literally say, "Don't do karaoke. There's no such thing. It's just these kind of places." And and we were just, we got off really lightly, and so maybe it did have something to do with Alex. I'm going to name Alex's NHS card.
Nice.
Awful, like, and after that, we just started just a couple of days. We just and because we were making our way to Tokyo for our first trip, and we was just like, yeah, we were glad to get in Japan because I kind of understood that place. China, I would love to spend a couple of months just going around China because it's just such a unique place. But yeah, I don't think the nightlife is a bit scary for me, for my blood.
Nice. Let's take it on to the final question now, and it's all about dream destinations. So, where is the first place that you're going to go when you can do after COVID is over?
I'd really want to take my girlfriend to Japan. I love that place so much, and she's unconvinced. She's not a city break person. She just likes relaxing. So I'd like to take her to Tokyo. I'd like to take her to some really busy places, but I'd also like to take her to, because I've never been to Okinawa, like the kind of more beachy kind of climbs. Japan's not known for their beaches at all, really, but they're more sort of snowboardy and stuff. But they do have their moments. So I'd like to take her there. But also, yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to sort of go to like the sort of Thailand kind of, or those kind of places,
Okay, cool,
kind of Indonesia and Thailand and those sort of places. Because I did a bit, because for the longest time I was sort of going with mates, and like you tell people you're going to Bangkok with your mates, and it's just like, yeah, all right, man, you go to Japan every year, you're dirty power. And so it was one of those places I didn't necessarily feel comfortable sort of going to, because it just sounds wrong. I'm sure that's a terrible bit of stereotyping, but it just sounds wrong. So I thought, I'd really like to sort of visit those places with my girlfriend and just have a nice relaxing time, because I've just discovered this idea that holidays are relaxing, not just a chance to kill your liver with 11 days straight boozing. But I'd like to do Russia as well. I'd like to do a lot of China. I'd like to take a month and just do, the Caucasus and Russia and Yakutsk. I'd really like to go to Yakutsk. Nice. Obviously, minus 45 in the winter and plus 25 in the summer. Incredible swing. I don't know how, in the same way that New York gets very, very cold in winter, like unbelievably cold. I've done a couple of New Year's there. Ridiculous, and gets very hot in the summer. I don't know how the infrastructure deals with both extremes, but Yakutsk is like, I think it's the biggest swing in the world. It's such an interesting place, and I don't really know what's there. I've always wanted to go to Greenland as well. This is obviously just oil ricky people, basically people from the Americas and people who work in oil over there as well. People flying in from like Aberdeen and places like that. So yeah, I'd quite like to do Greenland as well. And a couple of other places like that, I suppose. Faroe Islands. Why does nobody got the Faroe Islands?
Yeah, go watch some top quality football.
Yeah, it's just weird, isn't it?
And Pete, I'm going to trial this question on you. I've not asked any of my guests it before, but my regular co-host, we did it on a previous episode. So you can go anywhere in the world with any celebrity. Where do you choose to go? What are you going to do? And who are you going to go with?
Now, because if you're with a celebrity that was like very famous, like unbelievably famous that everyone knew.
Let's say, for argument's sake, that you don't have to experience the negatives to being recognised.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I remember Ed Sheeran. He'd spent a lot of time in Japan just going up and down, but he was just this little ginger boy to the Japanese. They didn't know who he was. And so he's like one of the biggest stars in the UK, certainly on the world. So I'd get like someone unbelievably famous, like the bloke who does Mrs. Brown's Boys. Okay. I'd take him round China and just get him to just try and break China. They'd be so confused. It would be brilliant. He'd be so confused. And ultimately, it would prevent any more Mrs. Brown's Boys from being made. So high fives all around, people. High fives all around.
Oh, I love it. It's even stranger than I thought the answer was going to be. Thank you so much, Pete. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And thank you for coming on Travel Talks. I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Look forward to listening to the rest of them.